If we can all find our seats, we'll be starting in just another moment or two. Good afternoon, everyone. If we could please find our seats, we'll be getting started in just a moment. Thank you. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid. Ki mimini balemot. Lachein samach libi ve'agel kivodi. Af besarish kon levetach. Ki lo ta'azov nafshi lish'ol. Lo titein chasidcha lirot shachat, todieni orech chaim, sovas machot et panecha, ni'imot bimincha netzach. These words from the 16th Psalm. I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart exults and my soul rejoices. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. We come together today to honor the memory of Gary Markowicz. I personally never had the honor of actually meeting him in person. But I will tell you this, over the last several days, as I've spoken with people about Gary, they always begin the story with the exact same sentence. I've had 4 people say this to me in the last 10 minutes. they shake their head like this and they say, you know, he was a good guy. That's how every story's begun that everyone's told me in the last several days. You know, he was a good guy. And then the stories go on from there. Things they did together, stories they shared, moments of memory. And so we remember a good guy. In the Talmud, it says that there are 3 crowns. There's the crown of Torah, there's the crown of kingship, and there's the crown of the priesthood. So the crown of Torah, becoming a scholar, the crown of priesthood, the leadership of the people, the crown of royalty, the aristocracy of the society. And then Rabbi Shimon in the Talmud, who began that sentence, after the comma, he continues this way, and he says, but the crown of a good name exceeds them all. It's a Talmudic way of saying, you know, he was a good guy. A guy who had the crown of a good name. And so we honor Gary's memory today. We begin with words of nechama, words of comfort, mostly from the book of Psalms, but a few other places. Words that comfort his soul and the soul of his family. We'll end our service here in the sanctuary with words of Hesped. If you look up Hesped in a Hebrew-English dictionary, it will tell you it means eulogy. But really, it's more than a eulogy. It's the idea of saying that there are lessons to learn from the life of a good guy. So that maybe I, each one of us speaking for ourselves, maybe I can take some of those lessons from the life of this good guy and I can act the same way and be a good guy too. The word for funeral in Hebrew is levaya. Again, if you look it up in a Hebrew-English dictionary, it'll tell you levaya, funeral. But it comes from the verb to accompany. We are here today to accompany a soul. Our tradition says that when we die, our soul goes me'olam hazeh le'olam haba, from this world to the world to come. What is the world to come? In the famous line from Fiddler on the Roof, I'll tell you, I don't know. But I do know that it's a realm where our soul exists with God, in a place of spiritual purity. And so livaya, the Hebrew word for funeral, means accompany, that we come together to accompany Gary's soul as it begins the journey from this world to that world to come, that place of pureness in the presence of God. Afterwards, we'll make our way to Sons of Israel Cemetery, where we'll conclude with our kavura, with our burial ceremony. But we continue now with words of comfort as we hear words from the 144th Psalm. Adonai ma'adam v'te'adehu ben enosh v'tichashvehu. Adam lehevel dama, yamav ketzel over. O God, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow. We come and grow like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to return to dust, saying, return, O mortal creatures. Oh, if we were wise, if we understood where we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright, for they shall have peace. Adonai, you redeem the souls of your servants, and none who trust in you shall be desolate. We read from Psalm 23, perhaps the most well-known of all of the Psalms of comfort. We hear its words in Hebrew as well as in English. Adonai roi lo echsar, bino desher bitseini, al mei menuchot, yenahaleini, nafshi shovev, ancheni b'magle tzedek, liman shemo. Gam ki elech b'getz al mavet, lo yirara, ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha, hema yenachamuni, taroch lefanai shulchan neged zorarai. Deshanta bashemen roshi, kosi revaya, ach tov v'chesed yudefuni, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'vit Adonai, leorech yamim. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside still waters and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You've anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The 121st Psalm, another psalm of comfort that we traditionally recite. As the author, whether you believe in the traditional idea that King David wrote the Psalms, or if you believe the idea that others of his era did, it's clear that as they wrote the Psalms, they looked around to see the world that surrounded them. The 121st Psalm begins with these words, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. It's clear that they were standing somewhere in the foothills near Jerusalem, looking up to these heights that in ancient times were filled with trees, that in ancient times had pathways that people marched up to make their way to the ancient temple. Perhaps they might have spent some time in the north of Israel where they saw Mount Hermon, where today in the wintertime Israelis ski. On the other side of the mountain, so do the Lebanese and the Syrians. But no matter which side of the border they're on, they can stand at any time of year and marvel at the beauty of the heights, perhaps those snow-capped mountains. Gary spent a lot of time here in Colorado Springs, coming, as I'm told, in 1973, and practiced from the early 70s to 1991 as a doctor. I'm certain that on more than one occasion, probably more than one occasion a day, he looked in that direction and might have thought the same idea. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Esahinai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri Me'im Adonai Oseh Shamayim Ve'aretz. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is my source of help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and your coming, now and forever. In the book of Ecclesiastes, we read these words from the 3rd chapter. They say, L'kol zman ve'et v'kol chefetz tachat hashamayim. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. We look not only to ancient words, but to modern words as well. The modern Hebrew poet shares with us this idea of the journey of life. It's a long Hebrew poem, so I'll share it with you in English. It's just as beautiful there. Birth is a beginning and death is a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, an aliyah kedusha, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death is a destination, but life is a journey made stage by stage, an aliyah kedusha, a sacred pilgrimage from birth to death to everlasting life. We read in the book of Job. Job is a troubled individual trying to figure out the answers to the unanswerable. And in his sorrow, he cries out to God and he says, Adonai natan, Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mivorach. God has given, God has taken away, blessed is God's name. He cries out, Adonai natan, God has given. And like Job, we say God has given. God has given a soul that the consensus in the room, we already said it, He was a good guy. He helped a lot of people as a doctor, had a lot of friends, a lot of relationships, and he leaves a family that he helped grow and teach a lot of lessons. And like Job, we say God has given, and we're thankful for that gift of life. Like Job, we also cry out, Adonai lakach, and God has taken away. We often ask questions. Why now? Why with an illness? You can fill in the question you want after the word why, but the fact of the matter becomes that the why questions are, quite frankly, impossible to answer. And so my advice to Gary's family and to the rest of you, and I share this advice often, stop asking why. Ask better questions. I'll give you some. How? How did Gary make the world a better place? I see a bunch of you in the room already nodding because you're already answering that question. What? What did I learn from him that I can emulate so I can be a better person? I see more nods in the room because some of you are already thinking to the answers to that question. Who? Who are the people with whom he interacted that are not here today that I can continue to share his story and hear stories from them? These are the important questions that we should ask, not the questions for which there are no answers. But yet, like Job, we cry out, Adonai lakach, and Adonai, and God is taken away. But we can come to a conclusion like Job did as he finished his thought with, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. May God's name be blessed. May God's name be blessed because God gave a life that was a gift to so many. And so we can be grateful to God for the gift of that soul. And because that soul is a gift, we come together to do our job of levaya, of accompanying his soul. Why do we say the idea of accompanying a soul? Because no soul should be abandoned when our body dies. We come together to accompany the soul on that journey. Judaism teaches that we have 3 periods of mourning. They don't have fancy psychological names like Dr. Kubler-Ross and others have given in modern psychology. But they gave them the names of Shiva and Shloshim and Shana. Shiva, a week, the most intense mourning moments when we might feel shock, we might feel anger, we feel the intensity of our mourning. Shloshim, which means 30 days, or at least thereabouts, that our mourning still is there but seems to be a little bit less intense. And then Shana, which the Kabbalistic rabbis tell us means 11, not 12 months. Why 11 months? It's actually a beautiful story. According to tradition, as our soul goes on this journey toward the Olam Haba, toward the world to come, it goes through a process of purification. Even a good guy has a little bit of forgiveness to ask for. We all sin in different ways, for most of us in ways that we don't even know that we might have done. We say those words every Yom Kippur, for the sin that we have sinned against you knowingly or unknowingly. And so our soul goes through a period of purification. And the Kabbalistic rabbis say that for the average soul, it takes a year, 12 months, to go through that period of purification till our soul is pure enough to exist forever in the Olam Haba, in the world to come, in God's presence. But then they teach this. As we mourn, the year is only 11 months. Why? Because frankly, who am I to consider that my loved one was merely average and needed the full 12 months? No, he only needs 11, being the above average good guy that he is. It's a beautiful tradition that we have, and out of that tradition came the idea of unveiling of a headstone at the 11th month. But with these ideas of thinking of how we mourn and thinking good thoughts and praying for the idea of purification, etc., we can repeat those words of Job and say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. May God's name be blessed, that God shared with us the soul of a good guy. And so we begin to tell the story of that good guy. We'll tell the story today, and I hope that you'll continue to tell the story tomorrow and the day after and the week after and the month after. Our story begins in Houston on March 10th, 1944, where Gary was born to Jake and Florence Markewich. Went to the University of Texas at Austin, became a doctor and a dermatologist, and wound up here. And, well, we'll continue pieces of the story as we hear from some family and friends. And so we're going to invite Jeff to come up and share some words about his father with all of us.
We take a lot of comfort in the manner in which my father passed. For years, I've been expecting the call that your dad fell, he broke his hip, he's going to need to be in a wheelchair, he's going to go into a facility, he's going to linger. A few months later, whatever, he's going to end up passing away. What happened on June 22nd was different from that expectation. He was in bed with his Kindle in hand, his reading glasses on, and he passed away very peacefully. He didn't linger, which is exactly how we discussed the way he would like to go. On the other hand, if he had lingered, his final months were requiring a lot of professional care. He would have loved flirting with his nurses. He would have loved bossing his doctors around, and he didn't get that chance, but this way is the way he wanted to go. He was a good dad. We love you, and we miss you very much. And thank you, everybody, for coming.
And now we'll invite Bob to come share some words with us as well.
So who was Gary Markowicz? Well, first of all, he was our dad. He was my kid's grandfather, Papa Gary. And he was a good dad and grandfather, and we loved him very much, and we will miss him greatly. We've got many fond memories of him. His mind was sharp to the very end, and as most of you know, he loved to tell stories. For example, he was born in 1944 after his father returned from the war. When he was 1 year old, his parents needed a babysitter, and lucky for them, German prisoners of war were being farmed out from nearby Ellington Airfield. So his very first babysitter was a German POW. When he was a senior in high school, the redneck school board, as my dad referred to them, broke from tradition and decided that the Jewish kids would not get Rosh Hashanah off like they had in the past. So 2 days later, Hurricane Carla made landfall as the most intense hurricane to ever hit the Texas coast. The wrath of God? You decide. A couple of years after that, my dad and his roommate, Bobby Strauss, son of Robert Strauss, who was then chairman of the Democratic National Committee, were on their way to meet John F. Kennedy in Dallas. That was on November 21st, 1963. And most of you know what happened the next day. Some years he was the coach of the softball team, the Docs Jocks, and that was one of my best memories. Many of the players are here today. If anyone got hurt during a game, there was a dermatologist and a cardiologist and a podiatrist, and it goes on and on. If someone's allergies got the best of them, we had an allergist. That was the safest team in the entire league to play. I sometimes thought people, when they weren't feeling good, would just come to watch the games just to be there just in case. I don't know. So my dad was one of the smartest people I've ever known. Too bad I didn't get more of that. But anyways, he respected hard work. He was an old school dermatologist who focused on diseases of the skin and skin cancer. He did not run an assembly line. His patients loved him, and he helped untold numbers of people with their medical issues. In fact, just this morning, I received a text from a good friend of mine, Jeff Eisenstadt, whose parents, Vicky and Paul, are out here. And I'll read what Jeff had written. He said, "Your dad did some work on me in my late teens, and he was cool enough to get a mirror so I could watch him cut out some bump on my leg." Looking at the scar now. "What I remember from the last time I saw him was his awesome sense of humor, casual attitude, and while being the ultimate professional." And I think that summed things up really well. My dad loved his routines. When he would visit from Vegas, we always went to Fargo's first and then Toys R Us. He loved taking the kids to Toys R Us and buying Francis and Jules whatever they wanted. Let me see here. Moving him from Vegas to Colorado Springs was one of the best things that we ever did, and Harry and Andy helped to make that happen, so thank you so much for that. Every Sunday, we would bring him groceries, and we would visit, and his list was pretty predictable. Whole milk, 6 Granny Smith apples, a loaf of Wonder Bread, fried pork rinds, frozen fruit bars, pineapple and grape, good and plenty, and every now and again, some Pepsodent toothpaste. He loved his Pepsodent toothpaste. And ham. And he would sing, "Izzy, Ikey, Jakey, Sam, we're the boys that eat no ham." And he used to joke that he wasn't a racist, that he hated everybody equally. He was a big tipper, but only when the tip was deserved, and it usually was. His sense of humor was unique, to say the very least. He was rude, crude, and socially unacceptable, like he used to say. And it was always better to be pissed off than to be pissed on. I'll finish with a vignette from the Venereal World. It's a first-person account from my father as it appeared in John Potterat's book of the same title. "I'm a dermatologist moonlighting in the health department's VD clinic. I need the income while I establish my private practice. I'm also Jewish in a medium-sized community with a small Jewish population. There's only one synagogue, and getting to know just about everybody is easy. Right now, I'm entering the room where the nurses prepared a patient, a teenager, for a pelvic examination. She's flat on her back, eyes on the ceiling, knees raised, ankles in stirrups, a paper sheet covering her pelvic area. I say hello, and as she turns to look at her greeter, she alarmingly utters, 'Oh no, not you,' and buries her face in her hands. I chuckle. 'You're covering the wrong end.' This immediately relaxes her, and I spend time reassuring her that I would never talk about this visit to anyone. Whenever we see each other at synagogue services, we furtively wink, but we never talk about it again, even after all these years." That's my dad, and we'll miss him very much.
Thank you, Jeff and Bob, for sharing words about your father with all of us. We're now going to invite a long time friend, Harry, I'm making you sound old now, a longtime friend of Gary's, Harry Salzman, to share some words of his own, and also to share some words from Rabbi Simon Bergman from Gary's time in Las Vegas. I had the opportunity the other day to speak with Rabbi Bergman. Jeff told me that I had the fortune to have a short conversation with him because he only talked to me for 32 minutes. So I understand for those who know Rabbi Bergman is that true from the rest of the family? Oh yeah? Yeah, it was a short conversation of only 32. I spoke for at least 35 seconds of that 32 minutes. But he had some really beautiful things to say about Gary, and so we're going to let Harry share some of his own thoughts and some thoughts from Rabbi Bergman as well. Harry.
Thank you, Rabbi. So Gary was close friends with his rabbi in Las Vegas, who also married Carol and I almost 10 years ago. Rabbi Bergman asked me to read some words from him since he could not be here in person because he's 80 years old. Before I do, I'd like just to add a couple of things. I met Gary in 1973 when he relocated here, and we became best friends from the beginning. Carolyn would even agree to that. He was one of the kindest, generous, funny, intelligent, and caring men I've ever had privilege to call a friend. For almost 49 years, we shared a bond that I never took for granted, and I don't believe he did either. We lived just a few blocks away from each other, and in early years, we did everything from skiing together to really that Texan and to this Phoenix guy. We partied hard in those days, went to spring baseball games down in Greater Phoenix for years, and we loved attending concerts right up to the end. We shared good times and not so good times and stood by each other through both. Yes, Gary and I have been through every imaginable cycle of life. Gary was my best friend at Carol's and my wedding. Very appropriate title that he was one of the best, and I shall miss my life with him. Godspeed, my friend. I do love you, Gary. Now what I have for you is what I received from his rabbi in Las Vegas, Rabbi Simon Bergman. Shalom. My name is Rabbi Simon Bergman. I am the spiritual leader of Bethel Congregation in Henderson, Las Vegas, Nevada. Unfortunately, I could not be here in person today, but I join all of you in sadness and with a heavy heart to honor the memory and recall the life of our dear friend, Gary, with love and respect. When we think of Gary, we say, not how did he die, but how did he live? Not what he did again, but what did he give? These are the ways to measure the worth of a person. For all that was good in his life, we say, thank you, God, Baruch Hashem. As we recall his 78 years of life, we are both sad and thankful. We're thankful for the years he was granted and for the privilege of having shared some of those years with him. So we must not only mourn his passing, but we must celebrate his life. Let us think of all the lives he touched and what a difference he made to his family and friends, as well as his patients as a doctor. Let us remember his love, the gifts of his heart and mind that brought feelings of happiness, which will always be precious memories. I've known Gary since 1980. He was a mensch, a good friend, and a Geh Nashim, a good soul. He was my favorite Kohen who loved our Jewish religion, attending services regularly on Shabbat and holidays. To know him was to love him. He made a difference in my life, and I'm sure in yours as well. If Gary could speak to us at this moment, perhaps he might say something like this, quote, remember me each day, right from the very start. I will be forever near you, for I will live within your heart. As long as we live, Gary, too, will live in our hearts and minds now and forever. In closing, let me share a personal tribute I wrote and prepared in his honor. We thought of Gary with love today, but that is nothing new. We thought of him yesterday and the days before that too. His memory in our minds will never part. God has him in his keeping. Each one of us has Gary in our heart. Forever loved. May he rest in peace, now and always. Amen.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Rabbi Bergman, for your words as well. There's a passage in a section of the Talmud called Pierkavot. It means the sayings of our fathers or paragraphs of our fathers. It's a section of wisdom. It's a collection of pieces of advice from the ancient rabbis that didn't seem to fit in other places of the Talmud, but it was still good stuff. So they collected it into one book. And in there's a section where Rabbi Hillel, one of the greats of the Talmudic period, said, "Bamakom she'ein anashim hishtadel lihiot ish." It means, in a place where there are no mensches, try to be a mensch. And from the stories we've heard today and the stories that I've been told in the last few days and the stories that I can see in your faces and your eyes, maybe that's a saying that Gershon ben Yaakov HaKohen, Gary's Hebrew name, maybe he would have said that as well as Hillel. Although I'm not sure he would have said it. Maybe he would have just lived it. You know, we tell lots of stories of people's lives. And the key thing about those stories are not just to tell the stories, but to glean something about the person from those stories. And then, more importantly, act upon the lessons that we glean from those stories. And really, those stories that we've heard today and those that you'll continue to share, I think are shining examples of Hillel's words. Bamakom she'ein anashim, in a place where people are not being a mensch. Hishtadel lihiot ish, try to be a mensch. Help other people, whether it's your profession, as a dermatologist in Gary's case, or in whatever your profession might be. Bring joy to people by doing things with them, whether it's a softball team of doctors. No one ever got sick at those games, right? I'm sure. Free medical care and nobody was sick. How does that work? But whether it's bringing joy by playing with the other doctors or bringing the kids to Toys R Us or wherever it may be, there's something wonderful about being a mensch by putting a smile on other people's faces. It's often easy to be selfish and put a smile on our own face, but it says something about a person who takes the time to put a smile on somebody else's face. And so, in Gary's memory, may we all, hishtadel lihiot ish, may we all try to be a mensch. May we all try to bring good in the world. May we try to put smiles on other people's faces, whether it's hanging out on the baseball field or going to Toys R Us or being rude, crude, and what was the end of that? Socially unacceptable. If that works to put a smile on your face, that works too. As he brought smiles to all of you, may you give a little payback to the world and say thank you by putting some smiles on the faces of others. And if you do, then you truly honor his legacy. You remember and you pay the lesson forward. And what's the greatest tribute we can give to someone in their life? It's to pay the lessons forward that they taught to us. And here's the key piece of all of it. In the Talmud, on pretty much every single page of the Talmud, and there are over 2,111 double-sided pages in the Talmud, I counted. On every page, with only a few exceptions, it says, and Rabbi so-and-so said in the name of Rabbi so-and-so, who said in the name of Rabbi so-and-so. Why all these rabbis who said in the name of someone else? Because it's a way of honoring those who teach us something. It's easy to go out in the world and do something good and take all the credit for it. Go ahead, think of all the people you know who do that on a daily basis. Many of them are on TV a lot. But it's something else to say, I did something good, and I did it because my dad taught me to do that. My grandfather taught me to do that. My friend Gary taught me to do that. Dr. Markewich that I used to go to, he taught me to do that. It's something special to honor someone when we do something in the world that they taught us, and then tell other people who our teacher was. We give them honor in that way. And so, go out there and be a good guy. Be the mensch. Help others and put smiles on their faces. And when you do, say, you know, Gary taught me to do that. I know you never met him. Several people have said that to me personally. But I feel like I've learned a lesson from his life because I know people who did know him. And as they've talked about him to me, even though I never met him in person, I get the benefit of the beauty and the lessons of his life. And the more people that get that benefit, the more kavod, the more honor we give to him and to his memory. Ken Yehi Ratzon, I pray that this will be God's will as we go forward. We come to the traditional words of the El Malei Rachamim prayer, God full of compassion. In one piece of Jewish tradition, we say that this is the prayer that is the official release of the soul. The Kabbalists teach that when we die, our soul hovers around the body. And when we say this El Malei Rachamim prayer, it's our community's way of saying, Gary, here's your ticket to go on that spiritual journey. We release your soul from this place so that it might go on that journey to the Olam Haba, to the world to come. And by saying these words, we say that we are here to accompany you on that journey. So I'll ask all of you to please rise as we hear the words of El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utarim, Kezohar Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Gershon ben Yaakov HaKohen, Shalach le'olamo. Ba'al HaRachamim, Yastirehu b'seter knefav le'olamim, V'yitzuror yitzbor ha'chayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato, Ve'yanuach v'shalom mishkavo, Ve'nomar Amen. God full of compassion, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Gershon ben Yaakov, a Kohen, to Dr. Gary S. Markowicz, who has entered his eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us together say, Amen. We can all be seated. As we've come to the conclusion of our chapel service here at Temple Shalom, in a few moments we will make our way to Sons of Israel Cemetery. For those of you who know where it is, you don't need these instructions, but for others who might need them, you'll go out Monument over to Hancock and turn left. After you pass Fountain on the left-hand side, you will see the entrance to Evergreen Cemetery. Again, the entrance to Evergreen Cemetery, you'll turn left to go into Evergreen Cemetery. Before you go through the official gates of Evergreen Cemetery, to your right, you'll see a small side road, and as you turn right there, you'll see a sign that says Sons of Israel Cemetery. You can follow the dirt road around until you see the other cars that will there, and we'll gather together there at Sons of Israel Cemetery. This evening at 5 p.m., we will gather at the home of Harry and Carol Salzman. If you need more information on, do we have on here is the, I believe on these words, on this booklet here, you'll see the address there, so you'll be able to follow the address to be able to be there this evening. For those of you who just need to hear it, it's 1425 Cedar Ridge Lane. The address of the cemetery, if you need, is 1005 Hancock Expressway. The Salzmans are hosting everyone with the family. Casual attire is okay, and there will be a short minyan at there this evening. As we prepare to head to the cemetery, we have the idea of a Kriya ribbon. We give it to the children of Gary. You guys are going to place it on the left-hand side. And place it on the left-hand side of our clothes, as we do now. Kriya means tearing. And traditionally, we tear our clothing. In ancient times, we would put on sackcloth and ashes and tear the sackcloth to show the tearing of our hearts. In modern times, there are some who still tear their clothing. There are others who understand that, frankly, our clothing today costs a few more dollars than sackcloth and ashes used to cost in ancient times. And so we've created the tradition of this ribbon. And when we tear the ribbon, as you do, if you'll take, there's a little notch on it. And as you tear it, you'll repeat these words after me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet. The words mean, praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, the one true judge. The idea of tearing of our clothing comes from this idea. Sometimes when we remember, we cry. Sometimes when we remember, we laugh. People tell us you're supposed to cry at a funeral because we're sad. They're right. Some people say you shouldn't cry, you shouldn't laugh at a funeral because it's inappropriate. They're wrong. Because when we remember great memories, we laugh. And we're supposed to laugh, and we're supposed to smile. And we're supposed to cry, and we're supposed to be sad. We're supposed to be all of those things because that's part of memory. But in those moments when we cry, it's easy to see our torn hearts. In those moments when we smile and we laugh, it's not so easy to see that even in those moments, our hearts are torn. And so the rabbis of old said, let's give a symbol to represent that idea. the tearing of our clothing. So when those in the community see our clothing or the ribbon that's torn, they'll know that even though I might appear to be happy at the moment because I'm telling stories of German POWs being your babysitter. It's a funny story. We should laugh at that story, right? And even though we laugh at that story, we still have torn hearts. And this is an outward expression of that the rabbi said we should have, just to remind everyone that even in the moments when there's the smile on our face from memory, our hearts are still torn. And one other thought about our torn hearts. I don't know who it was that said, "Time heals all wounds." I don't know who it was that said that, but I know that he was not very smart, because that sentence is absurdly ridiculous. Time doesn't heal our wounds. Time gives us the ability to figure out how we're going to create our spiritual and psychological Band-Aid to put on the wound. If time healed our wounds, after this is, I'm not a doctor, I'm just a rabbi, but I'll play one on TV for a moment. If time heals our wounds and we go to the dermatologist to cover up the scar, that means that that wound is gone, and what it represents is gone, and the memory of it is gone, and the story of it is gone. That's not what we want. No, we need the scar, and we need the spiritual and psychological Band-Aid. That's what time does for us. It gives us the time to figure out, how do we create that? And with that, we'll close our service here. And we'll make our way to Sons of Israel Cemetery, again, 1005 Hancock Parkway, straight down Hancock that way. We'll gather there. We will have military honors to begin our service there, and we'll have our burial service. We're going to try to begin as close to 2 o'clock as we can at the cemetery, when our military honor guard will be there. We'll ask all of you to please remain in your place, although as we take our casket back to the funeral coach, we'll ask all of you to rise, and we'll ask our casket bearers to come forward, and we'll bring our service here to a close. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you shortly at Sons of Israel Cemetery. As we make our way to Sons of Israel, please do bring these little booklets with you, because on the back page are the words of the mourner's Kaddish, so you'll want to have those with you at the cemetery. Thank you for being here today, everyone, and we'll see you at Sons of Israel Cemetery shortly.